This episode contains spoilers for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cinephile Gamers podcast. I am your host, Bo Smith, and opening weekend finally saw a movie, and the first time in a while, and it is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, this has been a hyped up project for a long time, even right before we knew about No Way Home and what was going to happen in that, but Multiverse of Madness, whenever they announced that on their slate of movies, Marvel was hyping up. Everyone was like, oh, this is going to have serious implications for the Marvel Universe and the MCU as a whole, and what are they going to do with it? So I'm actually very excited that I got to watch this movie opening weekend, because I was really afraid of everything getting spoiled for me. And yes, this is going to be a spoiler review, so if you've not watched it, you need to go ahead and watch it, but I won't go into spoilers just yet. So, Doctor Strange, in the Multiverse of Madness. I'm just going to say Multiverse of Madness. That's going to be my easiest way of remembering it. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Benedict Wong, Elizabeth Olsen, and Xochitl Gomez as America Chavez, who is going to be a new player into this movie, and a bunch of other people, which we'll get into a little bit. So, and let me just say, before we even get into the plot, here is what you need to watch beforehand. You obviously have need to seen the first Doctor Strange film. You will have need to know the events of Endgame and everything. You actually don't need to watch Spider-Man No Way From Home in order to understand what happens in the rest of this movie. They make allusion to it, but it does not play a big role like we all thought it would. The other thing that you will need to know is WandaVision. If you've not seen WandaVision, that will be key into this whole thing as well. So let's go ahead and start off the movie. It actually jumps right into the action. You see this girl, America Chavez, as we come to learn, as they're in this dimension being chased by this monster, and you see Doctor Strange, but it's not our Doctor Strange, it's another multiverse Doctor Strange. They are trying to escape from this monster, see this book that is supposed to help them defeat it, but Doctor Strange ends up getting killed off, and you see this monster about to suck the power out of America, and she opens up a portal to the multiverse, and so she ends up in our universe of the multiverse, the one that we're all familiar with. And whenever she arrives, she's being chased by this monster. Doctor Strange sees this, and of course he and Wong go in, defeat this monster, and save America, who explains kind of everything that is happening to her and what she is doing, and she even, to prove her story, shows the deceased body of this Doctor Strange that she was traveling with initially, and so they bury that body, and then whenever they look over the monster, like, this isn't sorcery, this is witchcraft. And so Doctor Strange goes, hey, I know someone who might be able to help us. It flashes over to where Wanda, at the end of WandaVision, was hiding out and going over the book that she had stolen from Agatha. And as they're kind of talking about just kind of different things, she had mentioned, you could bring America to me and we can help her out with this. And Doctor Strange goes, I didn't even mention her name. And she's like, yeah, you didn't you? And you see the world around her start to change, and she dons her Scarlet Witch outfit, which is awesome. I'm so glad that they incorporated that into WandaVision. That's going to be her costume now. And so she starts to threaten Doctor Strange, and he realizes that the book that she has is called The Darkhold, which corrupts the mind of any person who reads through it and tries to cast spells from it. And so it's corrupted her mind, and she starts to tell Strange that, give me the girl, no harm will come to you. I just want to go to a universe where I can be with my children. Because from WandaVision, she actually had created this fake town where she had a life with Vision as well as had 2 kids. And so whenever she had to stop mind controlling this entire town, she lost those things. And so Doctor Strange is like, nope, I can't let you have her. We are going to protect her from you. And she's like, then you're going to be expecting a fight. And so the rest of the movie, it's just going to be Doctor Strange versus the Scarlet Witch, and to see who can basically save or control America herself, which, gosh, saying her name out loud so many times, it's funny. And it's comic books accurate. That is her name, America Chavez, but I can't help it anytime I say America just to think of Team America and the song that goes, America, bow down. So that's all I'm ever going to think about anytime I say her name. All right, so let's look at the pros of this movie first. I want to go over pros and cons before I go into the spoiler territory. So, the biggest thing for me in this movie, and I'll say this too, whenever I went to go see the movie, I was with Mackenzie and then a couple of our friends. And after we left the movie, we all had varying opinions about this movie. I was the only one in our group that really was like all for this movie and loved everything they did about it. And then there were a couple that were just like, it was okay. There was a lot that was wrong with it, though. And what's weird is I was not expecting that. And since then, I've heard so many different reviews on the internet where it goes on either side of the spectrum. People either really loved it or they were like, not the best MCU movie. So I'm kind of surprised about that. So here's what I really loved about the movie. It is the most visually entertaining MCU movie we have. I was so impressed by the creative choices in this movie. Like, of course, you've had moments from previous MCU movies, especially the first Doctor Strange movie, where whenever the Ancient One, like, pushes him out of the body and they kind of like go flying around all these different things. I was like, oh, that's so cool. But it didn't seem like they really explored that much, or the mirror mention was the only other big selling point of that movie. This movie, though, it has the most creative shots in it, and it also has like the most beautiful CGI from it. In fact, this might be a little bit early to call, but I think this has chance to win Best Visual Effects at next year's Oscars. Like, some of the parts in it is whenever Doctor Strange in America, they leap through these different multiverses. I mean, like, it just crashes through one thing, they end up right here. Like, they go through this digital world. They go through a world where, like, their faces are cut up and they're in geometric shapes. They go through a paint world. It's so cool. There's a part later on in the movie where, I'll just say this, where Wanda sees different objects in her house moving around, and like whenever she looks at her cup, she sees an ocean going through it. Or when Doctor Strange goes into this deserted multiverse world, which is shown in the trailer, so this is not a spoiler. When he visits that evil Stephen Strange, he opens the door and he walks up the front steps of the Sanctum Sanctorum, and you see like this ocean just kind of crashing in everything. It's just so cool to look at. I was very pleased the entire time, and after certain sequences, fights, whatever, I was like, thumbs up every time. This is so cool to watch. This movie feels like a horror movie. I had heard that going into it, and I was like, I don't know about that. I walked out and was like, okay, this was a little freaky. This is definitely the most different Marvel movie. Even so, more than Eternals, like the direction they went for was very different. Now, if you don't know, Sam Raimi was the director of this movie. Along with making the first trilogy of Spider-Man movies, he is known for horror movies like Evil Dead 2. And so that's going to be his bread and butter, is incorporating that in here. And he does a lot, like more so than I thought Marvel was going to let him. But that was the tone of the movie, and they nail it on a lot of things. Now, some of the content in this movie had shocking content, unsettling imagery. So if you're taking kids to see this movie, you may want to reconsider. It is rated PG-13, but I'll kind of go into it in my spoiler area why I think it probably should not be PG-13, because there was a few times where we jumped while watching the movie. I was like, this is different. In fact, I'll go ahead and say this, because this is like in the first few minutes of the movie. I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything. The monster that's chasing America, whenever they defeat it, Steven throws like, I think it was like a lamppost or something through its eye, and it actually shows it going through and the eyeball falling out. And everyone was like, ugh. I was like, whoa, wow. They would not show that in any other Marvel movie. I think the most gruesome thing that I can think of is Phil Coulson getting stabbed in the back by Loki. And that's, that was like 10 years ago. That being said, I do love Sam Raimi's directing style. Several of the shots in this movie feel like something he would do, and it offers something very different from MCU movies, like I was talking about. Now, that being said, I'll go a little bit into a con territory, because I know Mackenzie and Madison had problems with this, I think. At least I think she did, but some of the shots can be a little jarring. They can take you out of the movie if you aren't used to it, just because this is filmed a little bit differently than most MCU movies. It has that style that Sam Raimi is used to, so Like some of the camera angles, they're not straight on, they're tilted, or it does zoom ins on some people's faces. So it's very different in the way it's shot, the way cinematography goes, and the way it's directed. Elizabeth Olsen, fantastic, intimidating villain. This has been one of my favorite portrayals of villains in the MCU, which kind of sucks because, I'm used to her being the hero now, and I like that about her, but she does a great job as the villain, and you do understand her motivations. It's very clear early on. Some people might have issues with that, but like, if you watch WandaVision, that final episode, you feel for her whenever she has to separate herself from her kids and destroy this world that she's created. So I definitely see where she's coming from. Doesn't mean she's right and her actions aren't good. But yeah, I do see where she's coming from on this. And I think delivery of lines are great. In fact, early on, whenever she's talking about starting a war with Doctor Strange, and or he's like, you don't want to do this. And she's like, whenever I do these initial things, this is me being reasonable. You don't want to see me when I'm being unreasonable. And gave me chills. Gave me a lot of chills. There is humor in this movie, but I felt like the overall tone was serious, like I had mentioned before. There are jokes in this movie, like any other MCU movie, but even like the first 5 minutes, I could immediately tell, like, hey, they're trying to do something in this movie. It's not joke heavy. It's not overstaying its welcome on anything. This is like a very somber tone for the initial part of the movie. Some of the jokes do alleviate tension when they need to, but I mean, this is a horror movie through and through, and that's what I really enjoyed about this. Of course, if you're familiar with anything Sam Raimi does, you have to know that Bruce Campbell, who was in Evil Dead movies, is making a guest appearance in this, and I loved his guest appearance in this movie. He shows up in another universe where he's Papa Pizza, and so America steals like these pizzas that way they can eat, and he's like, hey, you gotta pay for those. And so Doctor Strange, I guess instead of like obliging or like trying to conjure up money, just casts a spell on him, making him hit himself for like a week or two straight, and it's like it'll wear off eventually. But just the way he portrays everything, Bruce Campbell does a good job. There's I don't want to spoil the second post-credit scene because I think it's great, where it reminds me of the Captain America one from Spider-Man Homecoming, where it was one of those things where you're expecting something big and there's no payoff to it, and it makes you just laugh instead. So that's all I'll say about that. Danny Elfman's score in this movie, fantastic. Chef's kiss. They got their money's worth out of him. I mean, the score overall, and he's done a Marvel movie before. I think it was just Age of Ultron, but man, in this movie, it's just so good. And you can immediately tell that too, because of some of the themes of the movie, just some of the creepiness to it in certain parts. There's one moment, and I guess I should just go ahead and say this, spoiler warning, for when they go to the evil Doctor Strange's house, that our Doctor Strange start fighting each other, and he pulls music notes from these sheets, and it starts playing like these piano notes. And they start having this music bell. It's almost like a Fantasia in a way. That's kind of what it reminded me of. And they use that for like a solid 2-3 minutes, and it's just so well done. And of course, the music so well orchestrated. And I was like, this is so cool. This is just such a unique, out of the box idea. And that's what I love about Doctor Strange, is that his comics and in general are supposed to be weird. They're supposed to be out there. They're supposed to be supernatural. They're not going to be your run-of-the-mill Spider-Man or Captain America comics. And I think that's what this movie understood. They understood the assignment in that we're just limited to our imagination. So let's just throw these ideas out there and create this all these different fantastical worlds that are possibly out there. Now, like I had mentioned before, some of the shots in this movie may be taking you out of the movie. Sam Raimi does have elements of campiness to it, I'm going to say, that tend to not work in MCU movies, or I guess modern day movies, it seems like. So you could lose some feeling of stakes in this movie. Whereas, like, I didn't mind it because I'm like, yeah, I'm used to that from this Spider-Man trilogy. There are other people I know that some of our crowd did not enjoy it, and I'm sure some of the people in our audience were just like, this is funny, and like you could hear laughs from it, and it does take away that overall feeling of the movie. In their quest to help save America, which, gosh, that's just so funny just saying that out loud. In their quest to like stop the Scarlet Witch from taking over America's powers, they are looking for the Book of Ashanti, which is supposed to be this magical book that's going to grant you any spell that you're looking for. I don't really care for this kind of plotline or that because it's just a MacGuffin, and MacGuffins are not necessarily good. Most of the time, they're not great, anyways, because it's lazy writing where it's just like, oh yeah, get this, it'll solve all your problems. They get to the book, and it's like 30 seconds after they get the book, the Scarlet Witch destroys it. And so you're just like, well, what was the purpose of this? Now you got to go back to the drawing board. And that being said, America herself does not seem to have much to do. And she's kind of a MacGuffin herself. Her power, like I had mentioned before, is traversing the multiverse. This is not her only power, but that's really mostly just shown in the movie. Like, I'm pretty sure she has, the standard super strength. I think she might have flight too. I don't know. It's not really shown. She doesn't have much to do. She's kind of a whiny teenager in this movie. That's all I really see her as. And not only that, but like, she's obviously going to be staying in the MCU. So what exactly are they going to do with her powers, or how are they going to incorporate that? Because I feel like if that is your power to transverse the multiverse, apparently she's the only one who can do it without any consequences for alternate universes, then she's going to be used as like, hey, just have her jump into this portal, bring back what we need, and bada bing, problem solved. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. They definitely could have done a lot more with her, and hopefully she gets better treatment from this. I think Xochitl does a fine job with what she's given, but she's not given much to do, honestly. Now, there are other things I do want to talk about, but for me to do that, I have to talk more about the story, so spoiler warnings ahead, and just whatever happens in the rest of the story, as well as my thoughts on everything, too. So as they're going in this new universe that they've landed in, they find Mordo, who is shown through the trailers, and you don't know if he's a good or bad guy. He seems to be good, and so he takes them in, but he drugs their tea, and so he sends them to this holding cell where they're blocked off, and so he tells Doctor Strange, the Illuminati is going to see you. For those that don't know, the Illuminati is, in the Marvel comics, like just a handful of important Marvel characters that are leaders of their teams or of their kingdoms that are going to be privy to secret information that they exchange to each other. That way they can make sure that the Earth is protected at all costs. And so he gets to the Illuminati and you get these awesome reveals. So first off, let me just go into the Illuminati. I was super happy that they got shown off. I wish the trailer itself had not overplayed its hand, because you do get spoiled on one of the members, and that is Professor X. And it's the 90s Professor X, because he's got that yellow wheelchair thing that hovers, but it plays that tune as well, like that little motif in that Danny Elfman score, and it just hits you in the nostalgia feels, because I was just like, I'm not going to get super excited whenever I see him. But as soon as he got on there, Richard and I were just like, oh, it's Professor X! And Patrick Stewart just does a great job. Also shown off is Haley Atwell returning as Captain Carter, which got some cheers in our audience. One of the more surprising ones that I thought was Anson Mount as Black Bolt from the Inhumans. I never saw the show. From my understanding, you don't need to watch the show because it's not that good. He was just the only character that's good in that. And so he gets to reprise that role in the actual Black Bolt accurate costume. You have Marshawn Lynch as Marie Rambeau, who in that universe becomes Captain Marvel instead of Brie Larson becoming Captain Marvel. And then the one that really shocked everyone in our audience was the world's smartest man, Reed Richards, and then he teleports in, and it's John Krasinski. There have been so many rumors about John Krasinski being the one courted to play the role of Mr. Fantastic, and he's been denying it for a while, and people who deny it are typically the ones that we should be like, I don't know. You're perfect. But there's fan art of him in this costume. And so people are like, oh, yeah, he would be good at Mr. Fantastic. And he was just like, no, I don't think I'm really interested in the role. So the fact that we got him was a huge surprise. They had mentioned before that Christine in this universe, Rachel McAdams' character, had said to Doctor Strange, yeah, I interned at the Baxter Foundation. Richard and I looked at each other like, oh, Fantastic Four reference. That's cool. And then he shows up and it was just crazy. And it was so cool seeing him. Anyways, I need to get back to the story. The Illuminati, they're talking to Doctor Strange and what happened to their Doctor Strange in that universe, how he went dream hopping, which basically is when you take control of your same body from a different universe, which is what the Scarlet Witch is doing. She takes over the Wanda from that universe and is out to get Doctor Strange and also take America as well. And so Doctor Strange tries to warn them of this. Wanda shows up and they get into this big fight with her. And this is where I thought the movie should get an R rating, because there's a lot of blood on her face. That's not why, but you can tell she's kind of deranged and she is not given any cares at this point. And so what I was really surprised about is the Illuminati goes out there and they're trying to talk her down, and it's just like, hey, you don't want to fight, you're not going to be able to win this. And even Mr. Fantastic is like, Black Bolt can whisper a word from his mouth and he can destroy you. And Wanda goes, what mouth? And so it pans down to Black Bolt's face and you don't see a mouth at all. And if you don't know Black Bolt's power, it's literally any word he utters, it's just this loud cannon of noise that can really decimate things. And so he starts mumbling and screaming in his head, and his head pops, like part of his head pops, and you see blood squirt. And I was like, I think everyone, I heard a few screams in our audience too. And so we were all shocked by that. And I was like, there is no way this is a PG-13 movie. And she just takes out each Illuminati member one by one. The next one is Mr. Fantastic. Unfortunately, you don't get to see much of his powers in action, because as soon as he tries to throw a stretchy punch, she just turns his body into string cheese and just unravels him, essentially. It's so horrifying. And then she takes on Captain Carter and throws her shield right through her stomach and just slices her in half. You don't get to see the disassembled body. I'm sure that's what would have set it over as an R rating, but yeah, it just takes her out completely. And then finally is Captain Marvel, where that's an intense fight for Scarlet Witch, but she still takes her down and brings a giant statue on top of her and kills her. And so as Doctor Strange is trying to escape with Christine as well as America, they are looking for the Book of Ashanti. They do find it, but like I had mentioned before, as soon as they grab it, Scarlet Witch just destroys it and then takes over America and sends Christine and Doctor Strange to another universe where they find that Stephen Strange and have to take on him, and as well as him having the dark hold of that universe, to which Stephen defeats him, throws him out the window, and he gets impaled as well. And you see like this third eye pop open too at various points. It's really creepy. But as the Scarlet Witch brings America back to her regular own universe, our current universe, I guess is what I should say, then Doctor Strange makes a plan to dreamwalk back into his universe, because there's no other way he can get back to our current universe. And so Christine's like, how are you going to do that when there's no Stephen Strange there? And he says, there doesn't have to be an alive Stephen Strange. And so he resurrects the dead Stephen Strange that was from a different universe that they buried in our universe and takes control of that body. I think that's just such a fun sequence in general, because there's these spirits that go after people who dreamwalk. And so they're trying to destroy Stephen Strange, and he's able to control them and makes them into a cloak where he can fly around. I thought, like I said, out of the box thinking that's so creative is perfect for a Doctor Strange movie. Obviously, they get into this fight with Wanda and try to take her down. There comes a moment where there's this heartfelt speech, and then America's like, okay, I can control my powers. She opens up a portal back to that other universe where that Wanda was being controlled, and Wanda sees both alternate Wanda as well as her kids. And so she knocks that Wanda out of the way, and those kids are freaking out, and they're like, she's a witch. Stop hurting my mom and everything. And she's like, no, don't you see? I'm your mother. And they're like, no, you're not our mom. And so Scarlet Witch starts to internalize, like, I've become a monster. These kids that I wanted in my life, they're scared of me now. And so she realizes what she's done is wrong, and the portal's closed, and she's like, I have to stop this once and for all. And so she starts tearing down this temple that's around her and seemingly just kills herself and while destroying this temple as America escapes and finds Christine and Doctor Strange again and brings them back to their correct universes and everything. Of course, as the movie ends, she starts training as a wizard and starts to tell Doctor Strange, thank you for your help. I think I can finally get my powers under control. Doctor Strange repairs this watch that's shown throughout the movie that Christine had given him on a date years ago, and he starts walking out of the house. But as soon as he walks out of Sanctum Sanctorum, he just starts writhing in pain, and you see that a third eye sprouts from his head as he was using the Darkhold. And then the movie just goes to credits, and you're like, what in the world is this ending? Like, you're just going to leave us on that note? Dang, Sam Raimi. Like, what the heck? Oh, man. It's just such a weird twist ending that I don't know if I was a fan of it, but I'm like, this seems Sam Raimi. Exactly. So a couple of the other things that I just want to go over, pros, cons. Like I said, Illuminati is good. And you know what? A lot of people are angry that I've seen different arguments for that, they're just cameo appearances, nothing more. Like, I understand that they're not given the character development or that they're supporting roles like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were in No Way Home, but they don't have to be. I feel like for what they were in this movie, that is a good role that they served. They didn't really need to do much more with it. So I was overall satisfied with it. The zombie Strange moment, like I said, just so creative. It was out of the box. I thought was kind of funny in that campy way that had me laughing, that I think a few people were eye rolling about, but I thought it was a good moment. However, there is a moment where like he's having a heart-to-heart conversation with America about, you do have the ability to control your powers. It starts off fine. The longer that moment went on, the more I started to laugh, because you have to think, this Stephen Strange is a zombie, and so his face is decomposing. He almost looks like Two-Face because you can see like through his cheek and into his mouth, and he's kind of got that Two-Face voice going on as well, where it's a little gruff. And so the longer it went on, the more I just start to giggle and start to laugh in the theater, and just how absurd it is. Like, it's supposed to be a heartfelt moment, but this impassioned speech is just ruined entirely, and I couldn't stop laughing at it. And like I had said before, it just ends on a wild note. Like the third eye coming out of his head that you saw from the evil Doctor Strange now happening to our Doctor Strange. It was really weird. But what made it even stranger is that the first post-credits scene, a little bit of time has passed because he's wearing different clothes, but he's walking down the street. All of a sudden, Charlize Theron appears as a character we don't know the name of, who doesn't introduce herself, and is like, you started an insurrection by going to another planet, and you need to pay the price, or something along those lines. She opens up a portal to the dark dimension, like the place that Dormammu lives in, that dimension. And I can't remember the exact words, but it's like, are you coming with? And she kind of gives a wry smile. And it's like they know each other already. I don't know how they know each other, but Doctor Strange kind of goes along with it because he puts his cape on and like goes into costume, and then his third eye opens up, and you're just like, so wait, is everything fine with him now? Like, what? And they hop in the dark dimension, and it just goes back to the credits. So there's so much like, what is happening? Because you gotta think, like 10 years ago, the phase 1 of the MCU, you have the moments like Nick Fury talking about Avengers Initiative, or you see Thor's hammer out in the desert. And so you're like, oh, this is exciting. I can't wait to see what this leads to. With these characters like America, and apparently this character is named Clea. She's from the Dark Dimension. I had to look that up from my Marvel book because I had no clue who she was. We're really going into the deep, obscure characters of everything. Kind of like the C and D list characters. No offense to the people portraying them, because they're doing an all right job portraying them, but like, you're just leaving yourself open to more questions. I felt this way during Eternals 2 when, shoot, I'm so sorry, I can't think of this guy's name. It's Jon Snow in my heart. It will always be Jon Snow. But like when he pulls that sword out in that post-credit scene and then you hear a voice, which was Blades, you're just like, what is going on? Really isn't explained much. This is for like the nerds, us deep-seated Marvel fans, and I guess deeper than me since I didn't know who Cleo was, but I don't know. It just asks a lot of questions. And are we getting more of this Third Eye Strange? That leaves the door open a lot, because apparently he was fine a little while later and he's learned to control it, embrace it. Does he have the Darkhold? Like, has that messed with his mind a little bit? I don't know. Is it going to be answered in a third Doctor Strange movie? I guess, but there's no announcement for it yet. I don't know when they'll make that announcement. I don't know when the next, I guess, big crossover event is, because they haven't announced one, really. It's all like separate movies, but they do want to remind you that you're in this larger universe, which is fine. But with this movie, I don't think that they answer the question of what is going to happen now that the multiverse has been broken open. I still think we're on the precipice of that a little bit. Now, the fact that they showed the Inhumans and Mr. Fantastic in this movie, I think is telling, because now that we have seen these characters, obviously we knew we were getting a Fantastic Four movie, but now that we've seen these characters, you're just like, okay, maybe they'll have more hints as to what the future of the MCU is going to be. And this is what I had told our friend who went with us, Richard, at the movie last night, that there hasn't been that big bad like Thanos. They're not revealing anything. Personally, I think they kind of showed it at the end of Eternals with the Celestial, but I think that might be further explained a little bit more whenever Fantastic Four gets revealed, because they have a lot of powerful enemies, or they've gone these galactic or molecular level adventures in the comics, at least, to where they have a wide range of people that they have interacted with, and they have made a lot of enemies along the way. All that to say, I don't think this has showed us like where the MCU is headed, but I think we're getting a hint as to where it might be going. That being said, I do see some of the criticisms of this movie as far as script writing goes. Like I had mentioned before, the Sam Raimi shots being a little bit jarring. But for me, at least with that latter half, I do enjoy that. I think this has been the most different MCU. And I appreciate it more because of that. It could be the recency effect as well. But this has been one of my more favorite MCU movies, especially like overall. I thought it was a much better Doctor Strange movie than the first Doctor Strange movie was. And I think with the creative choices that they decided to take in this movie, from the tone to the visualizations to the shots, I think really sets it apart. Maybe the people who are not fans of this movie might need to sit on it for a few years. I think this movie will age better than most other MCU movies have previously. So I do think this is a very good standout movie. Yeah, I do have a problem with some of the script writing in it, as well as the fact that Scarlet Witch does seemingly kill herself off. That was another point that I was going to make. And I agree with our friend Madison, who made this point last night, is they killed off another powerful female lead, and there's not a lot to begin with. You could argue that Captain Marvel is a powerful one. I was not super impressed by her first movie. I thought she was kind of that MacGuffin character in Avengers Endgame, so jury's still out for me on if she's a good one. But you have Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, who I thought has always done a good job, and she's gotten to develop her character more over the last couple of movies and her show. You have Black Widow, who's no longer in the MCU. Hope Van Dyne, I thought was cool in Ant-Man 2. Maybe we can get to see more of that. But other than that, I'm not really imagining any other heroes. So, or at least female heroes. So, the fact that we might lose her, I don't know. I do think it's left a little ambiguous in her death. Not only that, but like there was a new Vision in WandaVision. Whenever he flies off, you don't know whatever happens to him. So my guess is he's going to regain his memories and then go and look for Wanda, maybe save her, bring her back to life. I don't know. That's going to be my theory, and we're going to see her in a later movie, and she's going to be good again. So that might lose a little ill will and take some of the stakes out of this movie. I don't. It just depends. We don't know where the MCU is going right now. So if this is Elizabeth Olsen's last movie as the Scarlet Witch, I'm going to be sad about it. But you know what? I thought she had a good arc as this villain, like hero turned villain. So I'm glad to see that portrayal done so well, especially since it's kind of comic book accurate to how mentally unstable she was there as well. So, all in all, this movie does have its faults. I completely understand that. However, I think this movie just does so well at going in a different direction. The horror tones in this movie are so cool. The shots in this movie I really loved. I loved the directing style. I loved the visual effects. The visual effects definitely were the best part of the movie for me. I was always awed and amazed by what they decided to put in this movie. And even though the Illuminati was revealed in those early trailers, Marvel, don't do that again. Leave that surprise. That is a jaw-dropping, cheer-worthy moment. I still enjoyed those cameos from those characters. I thought they were implemented well, didn't really overstay their welcome, but it was a strong part of the movie. And the fact that this movie took a more adult tone, especially when you have movies like Guardians and Thor that try to make it a comedy, and they really don't need to. They just need to be a superhero movie first and foremost. And if you want to make a comedy movie, that's fine. But for me, Thor 3 felt too much of that. Guardians 2 expanded the jokes from the first Guardians movie, so it kind of overshadowed some things. And we're getting Deadpool. There's going to be a Deadpool 3, so that's your comic hero right there. There's nothing more to be said about that. And then Spider-Man, of course, with his quips, those are character accurate for him. I don't know. Anyways, love the tone of this movie. There were a lot of strong moments for me. Like I had mentioned before, I think it might be the recency effect, but I'm going to give this a pretty high rating. This is definitely one of my more favorite Marvel movies. So all in all, I'm giving Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness a 9 out of 10. So, did you get to see this opening weekend? Did you love Doctor Strange 2? Did you hate it? Tell me what you thought. I'm really curious to know now. You can follow our show on Facebook or Twitter and make comments there. I like to post updates on shows or just other things that are movie or video game newsy type stuff. Or if you really like the show, you can subscribe to our Patreon account where we will be submitting some bonus material here pretty soon. So all in all, guys, thank you again for joining me on this show. Can't wait to see you in the next episode.